there is a lot going on with the FBI search of Mar-a-Lago. And let's be real, all the headlines are starting to get pretty confusing. So here's the latest. Trump and some Republicans are calling for the release of the affidavit that permitted the FBI to search his Florida home. They say releasing it is in the interest of transparency. Now, the Department of Justice, on the other hand, is saying no way, because releasing this information could identify witnesses and disrupt the investigation. So Trump posted this message on his social media platform, writing, quote, "I call for the immediate release of the completely unredacted affidavit." He also called the search a break-in, quote unquote, and said the judge for the case should recuse themselves. So what is an affidavit? Should it even be released? For more on this, and to help answer these questions, please welcome defense attorney and legal analyst for 9 News right here in Denver, Scott Robinson. Thank you so much for joining us.
My pleasure.
Scott, Tori here, real quick, what is an affidavit and how is it different than a search warrant? And if you could, just your personal take, what do you think is in the affidavit? I tend to think perhaps the informant is in there and the safety of that informant could be compromised.
The affidavit is the sworn statement by an investigator setting forth the evidentiary grounds for probable cause. You can't get a search warrant without an affidavit, or as often called in federal court, an application for a search warrant. It is a sworn statement that typically would include witness statements, video or surveillance observations, any kind of evidence that the law enforcement agency believes they have that a crime has been committed, and that evidence of the crime will be found in the place sought to be searched. It's an integral part of every case that involves a search and seizure. And the affidavit is, of course, critical to determining whether there was or was not a legal basis for the search.
All right, well, that's going to help explain Law and Order to me. You know, just because they're always like, we need the search warrant, and the judge is like, all right, just this once. So I want to ask you, are affidavits typically released? Is there a good reason to release them or keep them secret? Like, what about transparency? Like, is that what the people deserve, or are they usually kept secret? Great question.
Yeah, a release of an affidavit while a case is pending is absolutely a no-no. That permits such things as witness tampering. There have already been allegations of witness tampering with January 6 witnesses. So you really don't see the affidavit until a case is filed. And it isn't a question of transparency. If this was, for example, an organized crime case and it wasn't a political case, you really wouldn't even think that the government would give up its witnesses and its evidence prematurely. They're gathering evidence, they're reviewing what they got, and the idea that this should be released as a matter of transparency is nothing but a political ploy.
Okay, Scott, let's get right to that. So a lot of people are saying that this is all a political game, like you just mentioned. The search warrant is the Department of Justice bluffing, and Trump is calling their bluff by asking for the affidavit to be released. So what's your take on that?
I think that's an incredibly cynical view, and there's absolutely no support in it historically. The FBI has done a great job for literally decades and decades. Sure, there have been missteps here and there. But when it comes to getting a search warrant, you can rest assured that there was plenty of evidence set forth in that affidavit that supported the issuance of a search warrant. And the idea that this was just a political game is nothing but political posturing. Ultimately, we will see what's in the affidavit, if in fact a criminal case is filed. If no criminal case is ever filed, it probably won't be released, except perhaps to the subject of the search, Donald Trump, and or his attorneys. But for now, it's not even vaguely within standard judicial and law enforcement procedures to release the affidavit prematurely. It would sacrifice the identity of witnesses and permit all kinds of shenanigans if in fact there is evidence of a crime that was committed.
It's good to hear that. It really is. We need to hear all that clarity. Let's talk about Trump's former personal attorney, Scott, Rudy Giuliani. Yesterday, we learned he is the target of a criminal investigation in Georgia. This is all, of course, related to possible 2020 election interference in that state. So in your legal expert opinion, what kind of charges could he be facing?
Well, there'd be some sort of election fraud related charge. Or at least speculation that it might be making false statements or a racketeering charge or some sort of conspiracy. But the bottom line is simple. The question is, did he commit a crime in his actions pertaining to the Georgia electoral vote count? And, there's no way of telling what there is or is not available. I do anticipate him taking the fifth if he ever sits down in the witness chair.
Yeah, I would totally agree with that. Here's the million-dollar question for you, Scott. Do you think Trump or Giuliani are likely to face charges or, and I'm just adding this, to see actual jail time in either of these cases? For me, Giuliani, for sure. I don't know about Trump. I want your opinion.
Yeah, here's the reality. Rudy Giuliani is elderly. He may not be completely compos mentis.
Right.
He's certainly not the person he was decades ago. And at his age, with his health problems, I would think incarceration was very unlikely. But the reality is this. Anyone who speculates about either Donald Trump or Rudy Giuliani or any of the other cast of election denier characters is just speculating. It's inappropriate, and it would be a political ploy on my part to give opinions about what people should be charged with when we really don't know all the evidence. There certainly seems to be some basis for the idea that there was an effort to interfere with the counting of the electoral votes from Georgia and the counting of the votes cast. But whether that arises to a crime or not is something that we really need to see a lot of evidence about. And thus far, all we have is what was publicly known. A phone call here and there, and nothing more.
Wow. Well, we'll just have to wait and see. Scott, thank you so much for joining us today and answering all of our questions. We appreciate you. Thank you.
Thanks.
My pleasure.